Awesome. So I just want to welcome you guys to today's workshop, the Momentum Workshop. As you guys know today, what I'm going to be doing, just to give you a quick heads up, we did the workshop live on Tuesday, but because I wasn't feeling 100%, I kind of wanted to re-record some things and make sure that it sounded okay and it was best quality as I could. Um, how we're going to proceed, just to give you guys all a heads up, as I go through the workshop, there's going to be some steps that I'm going to go through. And as we go through the steps, after each step, I'm going to just kind of pause and give everyone an opportunity to unmute themselves, ask questions, because I want you to, more than just information, I want you to walk away with one, commitments that you're going to make. And then number two, the clarity that you need to actually implement some of the things that we're going to be talking about today. And so again, I'm going to share certain things, but I'm kind of depending on you and your questions to ensure that you have the clarity you need to apply the things we're talking about today. And so again, I want to just welcome you guys to today's workshop, our momentum workshop. And the big goal that we want to really accomplish is we want to stop doing ministry alone. We want to ignite our teams, and we want to move the ministry forward. And whenever I think of the term alone, many times when I speak to pastors and I say stuff like, hey, do you have a team? Are you doing everything on your own? They'll say, no, I have a team of people. And what they really are saying to me is, I have a team of volunteers, but the majority of the decisions come from me. The majority of, the direction and the vision and even the accountability comes from me. And so what that does is it creates this tension or this moment where the progress of the church is connected to the energy of the pastor and his availability. And so we want to kind of move away from that and move into a more of a team leadership approach where we've got some other people who are helping us carry the weight of the ministry. And so most pastors, they don't burn out because of a lack of prayer, preaching, or passion. Like if I sat with any one of you and I said, how's your prayer life? I would say most of you would rate it maybe on a humble side. Maybe you say, it's a B minus. It could be much better, but I'll give myself a B minus. The same with your preaching, your passion. But the burnout really comes from this idea of carrying it all on our own. And the truth is that it's never been God's design for us to do ministry or to be the primary director of ministry. And one of the things that really came to me was in Ephesians 4:12 years ago through my own experience was this one phrase where it says that the responsibility of the fivefold ministry was to equip the saints for the work of ministry, right? To equip the saints for the work of ministry. I think one too many times, what I find myself is I misinterpreted this verse and I thought it said my job was to actually do the work of service. And the reality is that the verse doesn't say that I'm responsible for doing all of the ministry. It says I am responsible though for equipping people to do the ministry. Doesn't mean I don't do some of it, but what it does mean is that it's my primary responsibility to equip and empower the people around me. And so, just to give you guys a little bit of credibility, I've had the opportunity to work with a couple of pastors recently. Number one, Pastor Ryan Stockstrom. He's out in Frazee, Minnesota, and one of the things that we were able to do with him specifically is his church was at 60, kind of stuck at 60 for a bit. But the bigger challenge for him was that he had two part-time workers, and then it was himself, and every execution, every ministry was based on those three. So if they were not available to do anything, it wasn't going to get done. And we eventually, over time, really got to a point where we were able to identify volunteer leaders. So when he was executing some of his outreaches over the summer, they're in a unique place in Frazee where they would do an event. One of them was called Turkey Day, and it was part of like the community. They would go hunting, and I guess they would prepare some meals, and it was like a community thing. But instead of him now being responsible, he actually had an outreach leader who handled all of the details, and he'd come up and preach and do those things. Pastor David, who's out in the Philippines, Again, he had a church of 30. Because of some outreach efforts that we worked on, he went from 30 to 70. And then when he hit 70, it really began to stall because the process or the culture, everything was depending on him. And so the ministry stalled. And so the last couple of weeks, we've really been spending time focusing on identifying teams and identifying responsibilities and roles so that way he can really rely on other people to do the ministry. And then Pastor Frank, about 2 weeks ago, I was able to go down to his ministry and help him host what we call a leadership interest meeting. And he was able to recruit an additional 15 between volunteers and about five new leaders to really help him to stabilize the ministry so everything is not going through him. And here's what's so great about all three of them have said two things. Number one is that when they've kind of started shifting to a leadership approach or a team leadership approach, one, it created excitement among the volunteers. So everyone who was a part of the team actually was really excited about it. And then the second thing is that it gave them clarity, right? Like they knew what we needed to do next and what the approach was. And see, most pastors, they believe if I'm faithful, then I need to be available to everyone all the time. Right? Faithfulness means I've got to show up to everything. Volunteers help, but only staff can really lead. And I used to hear that all the time. We're the staff. We're the ones who are here to do the ministry. And volunteers, it was almost as if we gave them an excuse to not be faithful. Well, because they're volunteers, we can't expect much from them. And that was a belief that was really a false belief. And one another belief that I used to hear is if I don't do it, it won't get done right. And I don't know how many of you have ever said that, maybe to yourselves or to your spouse. If I don't do it, it's not going to get done right. And the reality is that that creates so much pressure because what it means is that you don't trust your team. You don't trust the people around you. Let me phrase it a little differently. You don't trust the people that God has put in your ministry or in your sphere of influence. All right. And another thing that I hear all the time is church growth will come if I pray more, if I preach harder, if I work harder. And the reality is, and this is going to sound very unspiritual, so forgive me, but you can pray more, you can even preach more, but growth isn't always connected to what happens on a pulpit on Sunday. It actually is connected to what's happening in the lives of the people during the week. And so when you go from a place of, hey, I've got 4 or 5 people who are core people excited about the ministry to, hey, I've got 15 or 20 that are now like, man, I am all in on the vision. I'm there, Pastor. When do you need me? I'm ready to serve. Hey, I saw this, Pastor. And I'm not going to go over this in this workshop, but sometimes when I'm coaching some of the pastors, we walk through what I kind of call the circle of commitment. And on the outside, you've got people who are kind of like spectating. On the inside, you've got core people who are like, God, not only or Pastor, not only am I giving you my hands so I can serve, I'm giving you, my heart so you understand that I'm passionate about the ministry. But what I find is the most committed people give me their minds. They're constantly thinking about the ministry. They're thinking about how do we make things better? How do we do things differently? And so I'm always trying to challenge people, what do you think about this? How do you think we can do this differently or do this even better? Because the more I can get people to start thinking about the ministry, the more their hearts are going to be committed to the ministry. And so here's the thing, we stay stuck when the weight of ministry falls on one person, right? If it just falls on you, you're going to be stuck. And just to be completely honest, you can be stuck at 200. You can be stuck. I know some churches that have been stuck at 400. And in our minds, especially if our church is less than 100 or like 400, I'd love to be there. The problem isn't numerical. It's the length of time that you're in one position, right? We should always be progressing forward. It's when, hey, if you're at 50 and you're at 50 for the next year and a half, 2 years, then something is missing. Something is off. We've got to fix it. If you're at 500 and you're at 500 for the next year and a half, that means that there's some adjustments that need to be made. We should always be making progress forward. And the cost of waiting. Here's the thing, when we the more we wait and we don't quite address these issues, obviously there's the stuckness, we stay stuck, but we also forfeit seeing people in the community come to Christ, right? The ministry is stuck, but our impact is also stuck. And to me, listen, again, when I look at the numbers of the church, it is what it is. It's great. I love it. Your church is growing fantastic. But man, there are people in your community that are stuck in their situations, that are dying in their sin, that when they go home, some of them don't even want to go home because there's no peace in their home. And the real reason is because they haven't had a genuine encounter with the gospel. They haven't had an encounter with Jesus. And so when I think of the responsibility and the things that we have, the opportunities we get, I say, man, we've got to make sure that we're making these shifts because it's not just about what's happening inside of the church, but it's because of the impact that is happening on the community and the people around us. I remember, and this was illustrated by a conversation I had with a pastor. She was based out of New Jersey, and I walked her through a connection process because they were seeing first-time guests, but they weren't connecting first-time guests. And when we finished this conversation, I remember her saying to me, "This is awesome, but I don't have the time to do this." And I didn't want to overreact, but I remember feeling on the other line, thinking to myself, "What? You're seeing people, God is bringing people to your church, and you don't have the time to connect those people?" I was like, "What?" But I realized it wasn't her fault, it's how she was taught to lead the church. She was taught, I'm the pastor, I'm the minister, I've got to do all of the work. And that's why it's so important because this is not just about you. It impacts your home. It impacts your ability to be a mom, a dad, or to be a spouse. It impacts all of those things. But it also impacts people who are coming to your church looking for a way to get connected, looking for hope, and never get connected, never have an encounter with Jesus. And so I'm kind of just putting a little bit of the clamps on a little pressure to understand that this stuff is urgent. So by the end of this, I'm going to share with you how to leverage teams, how to lead teams, and the big question, and I hope I've set this up is just for you to just even think about, or in the comments, just let me know. Are you willing to go all in? And when I say all in, at the end of the day, I want you to make a commitment to yourself that we are going to make sure that we're going to develop leaders, raise people up, so that way we have more bandwidth to reach the community, more bandwidth to be able to make an impact on the kingdom, more bandwidth to be able to see people come to faith and lives being transformed and discipled. So when we say all in, it's the commitment that I'm not going to do ministry by myself because I can become the biggest bottleneck to the growth of the church. All right. So just kind of let me know in the chat or just kind of give me a nod or some sort of yeah, we're in. This is for real for real. All right, so let's I'm seeing some thumbs up, I'm seeing some nods. Awesome. So let me jump right into uh, here's what I would call a church growth formula. It's I always hesitate when I use the word formula because I've been taught that there's no formulas in Christ, right? I've always been taught that. And so I'm like, formula kind of maybe, but here's three key things. Obviously, God is in center, right? Everything we do is from him and to him, right? It flows from him. He gives us vision, direction, but it's also to him. It's to honor him, to give him glory. And then in order to grow the ministry, not only do we have to be focused on the Lord, but we also have to have God honoring leaders, right? People around us who have the same convictions, the same passion, the same desire. And we need to have systems that serve the people that God is bringing to us. Okay, so in order for us to grow the ministry, these three things have to be evident in our ministries. Okay, we need leaders. What I mean by that is recruiting leaders, developing leaders, leading through teams. Right? We need systems, connect new families, evangelism, discipleship, how we do services, giving systems, right? All of these things that just really help us to serve people consistently. And when we're able to do these things, we start to see, man, I've reached people, I'm keeping people, I'm growing them. I'm reaching people, I'm keeping them, and now I'm growing them. I'm reaching, keeping, growing. And if you've ever worked with me, you'll hear that I say those things over and over again. I want you to reach people, I want you to keep them, I want you to grow them. And so for the next maybe 2 hours, maybe more like an hour and 15, I'm working for you to help you, and my goal is to give you my absolute best. So there's no questions that I won't answer. There's if something is not clear, please ask away. I want to make sure that this is 100% clear to you, right? Because we want to go from leading alone to leading through teams. Here's our agenda. Next 60 minutes, I'm going to show you the same frameworks that helped Pastor Ryan double his church by breaking the pastor does everything culture. I'm going to share the biggest shift that I made when I was the discipleship pastor that turned exhaustion into multiplication. And then I've got a bonus that I'm going to share with you guys at the very end. It's a document that I've put together. We call it a leadership interest template. I'm sorry, leadership interest meeting template. It's the document that I use whenever I'm connecting with a new church and we're looking to recruit new leaders and new volunteers. In fact, I did it just recently. A couple of weeks ago, Pastor Frank's church, he's a church here in Brooklyn, New York. I went over to his church, walked him through, coached him through some of the stuff, and I believe he added about 20 people that one weekend. 20 volunteers. 20, and by volunteers, I mean volunteer leaders, right? They're all given responsibilities. And I'll again, this will be my gift to you for just spending time with me today, staying to the very end. I've mentioned to you about Pastor David. He went from 30 to 70. His goal, and here's why his goal is to go from 70 to 100 by December 31st. And here's what I said to him recently, and I wanted to stick. I said, it's easier for 70 people to reach 30. In other words, I've got 70 people who are on board. I've got this 70 who are like, man, I'm with you, Pastor. It's easier for them to help him get to 30 than for him by himself to try to reach 30. Right? It's simple math, nothing complicated. But the idea is, the real idea is getting this group of people to be bought in 100%. To be like, man, I am with you. I am in this. And so just again, speaking with him, one of the things that he just said is, hey, I have clarity. I finally have clarity. I know what I'm supposed to be doing and what others should be doing. Right. And so I want you to know that this is possible for you. This is what we're excited about. Real quick, just to give you a quick intro, if you don't know me, we haven't had the opportunity of really connecting. My name is Pastor Ariel. I'm a former discipleship pastor at Christ Tabernacle. Today it's called Saints Church. And when I was working there, when I first started, it was about 1,000. It reached to about 3,000 in New York City. I think the most impressive thing about it isn't 3,000, but the fact that there was no parking lot. And so it was like, man, growing a church and you don't have parking lot. It was, I can't tell you the amount of membership classes we did in the evening that I was late to because I just couldn't find parking. It was just circling around the block because it was a residential area. There's no parking in this area. And I remember being asked to launch small groups. And this was one of the most stressful moments of my life because we had immediately had 20 people who said, I'll open up my home for a group. And then another 50 who said, I want to be in a group. And what started to happen was I would call the 50 to try to put them in a group. I would get a voicemail. Then they would call me back, get my voicemail. Then I would call them and they'd say, no, I need two buses. There's two buses, that place is too far. Find me another home. And by the time I actually was doing this for a month, I was stressed out between phone calls and everything and anything and everything that was needed came to me. And so Brett, who was a small group coach for me, he was actually a coach from Saddleback. I remember that he challenged me. He said, hey, you're never going to be able to do this if you're doing this by yourself. You've got to build teams. And we did this meeting. We brought in about 20 people who were going to be leaders. And he simply just said this one thing. He said, hey, I'm gonna say a number and I want you to be able to tell me how many hours a week you can just commit to the ministry. And it was like 5. Some people raised their hand. 4, a couple of other people. 3, 2, 1. By the end of the meeting, he had recruited 40 hours of volunteer time for me. And I walked away saying, oh my gosh, I've got more volunteer time than I actually have work to be done. It hit me. It was like, this is how you get more ministry done. It's not just me by myself. It's got to be through people. God has brought in his divine wisdom the right people, and it might require me doing some development in them, but I was just awestruck at the amount of people who were ready and excited to join. And so, again, this was a church that started to grow, oversaw small groups, discipleship, systems, leadership development, and I learned firsthand the power of multiplying through teams. Today, again, if you don't know me, I coach pastors across the U.S., some overseas. Every one of them struggle with the same problem. I find this to be one of the most common problems. It's the pastor does everything culture, right? Congregants spectate, and then the pastor's in a position where he's doing most of the work. And they've experienced freedom and growth by building teams, right? And I've mentioned Pastor Ryan, Pastor Liberty Church, Pastor Joe Prasad. They've doubled. When I started working with them, they were at 200. They went to 400. I mentioned to you about Pastor David, Pastor Dan, one of my good friends. One of the things that he was able to do is he does an outreach every single uh, Thanksgiving. This past year, he did none of the planning, none of the implementation. He just showed up and preached, and they had over 500 people. And he was like, I don't know where all these people came from. I said, this is what happens when you get out the way and you let your teams do what they need to do. And he had over 500 people from the community. It was a church of about 150. I think this past summer they finally broke 200. So it wasn't this major church, but they were able to reach 500. Pastor Gersh, been working with him for about 2 years now. And when he first began, he was like, man, I'm done. I'm going to quit. I can't do all of this by myself. And so faithfulness, this is one of the things I want you to take away. Faithfulness isn't doing all the ministry yourself, right? I want to reprogram our thinking. Faithfulness is equipping others to do the ministry with you. Okay. And so we've talked about this framework, right? Church growth. To get even more granular, this is the framework that we teach. Let me see. Yeah, there we go. We see the whole slide. I call it the Ephesians 4:12 system based on two major key things. Number one is, as we said earlier, systems, right? Evangelism system, uh, assimilation system, a connection system, discipleship and develop, and then leaders, right? Organizing for growth. And then this idea of how do we identify teams so we stop doing ministry alone. These are the key systems that I see need to be active in order for your ministry to grow. Specifically for today, we're going to spend time on the bottom piece here, on organizing for growth and doing ministry alone. And I like to call this the foundation. I remember a couple of years ago, I used to go to college in the city, and during my 4 years of college, there was this one location that had this massive, massive hole. And there was all of these men with hard hats and machineries, and they were doing all this stuff. And I remember just thinking to myself, um, in order for you, and that hole, I came back a year or two later. I was on a date with my wife. We went to some restaurant. We walked by it. That hole became this huge, beautiful building. And I remember just kind of sensing in my heart that in order for you to grow, you've got to really develop that foundation. They spent 4 years on this. To my eyes, it looked like a huge, massive hole. I didn't know what they were doing in there. But when you build the foundation, what it does is it gives you the structure, it gives you the support you need to grow, right? Because any house with a weak foundation will eventually crumble. And so this is where we want to really focus on the foundation. So three key things that we're going to walk through today. Number one, organize for growth. Number two, build teams. Number three, accountability. So step one, organize for growth. The old way is this. The pastor is a system. Everything lives in their head. There's no real written vision, org chart, or clear roles. Okay. And if you've ever been in this position, I remember having one pastor who he was like the technical music director, and everything lived in his head. And so the problem was, as a volunteer at that point in time, I couldn't get anything done unless he was around because there was no documentation, there was nothing, there was no clarity. And so whenever there's no written vision, no org chart, no clear roles, volunteers end up having to guess what to do. And whenever they guess what happens next? the pastor typically ends up redoing it all, right? So when you have a volunteer who doesn't have clarity, they end up doing it. We end up cleaning it up all ourselves. And so the old way typically looks like this. You've got the pastor in the middle. He's got a vision for what the finish line is supposed to look like. And then you've got leaders going all over the place because they're not sure of the direction. And so when this happens, growth stalls because chaos, there's no growth can happen in chaos. And so the pastor spends more time firefighting, right, than planning. And whenever I think of this, I always think of the Rocky movie, the first one, when he's chasing chickens. That's part of his training. I might be showing my age, but he's chasing chickens in the alley. That's his training. And what I always think of is as pastors, when we're trying to get people, leaders, to follow a certain person, it's almost like chasing chickens. By the time you're done, you're exhausted. Forget growing the church. Forget doing ministry. I'm done because I spent more time trying to explain certain things to leaders or get people to do certain things. And so the problem is we spend more time firefighting. What we need is clarity and alignment. This is what that looks like. When everyone on the team clearly understands the finish line, right? Clarity, then alignment is a lot easier. You can never have alignment without clarity, right? And so the question becomes, well, how do we gain clarity? So I'm going to walk you through four specific questions. Whenever I'm working with pastors, there's seven in total that we work through, but I'm going to walk you through four. The first is, why do we exist? Right? And this question is all about clarifying vision. This is all about, where is God leading us? What's the purpose of our church? I like to ask it this way. What was on God's heart when he put it on your heart to begin the ministry? What was on his mind? What was in his thoughts when he put it on your heart to begin the ministry? What does he want to accomplish through your church? And one of the things that I ask the pastors, or I kind of give as I don't want to say a mandate, it's a little strong, but as direction, is whenever you're crafting your vision, I'm not worried about whether you have 100 of this or you're going to reach 100 people in the next 5 years. You know what I'm worried about? What kind of people are you developing? Right? So when we talk about the vision, I want the vision to clearly state what your discipleship outcome is going to be. You're going to have people who maybe are evangelistic, or maybe people who are passionate about, reaching their communities. I know some churches, they talk a lot about developing people who are holistically believers, so that they're demonstrating Christ at the job and at home and in every aspect, right? So the question is, when we think of your process, what are we looking, what's the outcome? What do we want to see developed in the people? I'm not just looking at your services. I'm not just thinking about the events you're going to do. All of those events should lead to a transformation that happens in the hearts and the lives of people. That transformation should be clearly stated in our vision. Okay, number two, how will we succeed? Right. So this is what I like to call strategy. So for me, vision is all about the destination. Where do we want to get to? Strategy is about the direction. What are the steps I'm going to take to go from where I currently am to where I believe God wants us to be? Think of it like this. When you jump in your car, I don't know how many of you use Waze, but I use Waze all the time. If I don't use Waze, I will get lost. And so what do? I get in the car, I pull up Waze, and I type an address. That address is my destination. It is my vision. It is where I'm trying to get to. Then Waze does some computation, some routing, and it gives me some steps. It tells me make a left here, go to this highway. Those steps are my strategy. It is how I'm going to go from where I currently am to where I believe God wants us to go. Here's the third. How do we behave? These are what we call leadership values. Why? Because this asks the question that I'm always asking is, okay, so now that we know where we believe God wants us to go and how we're going to get there, Who do I need to become in order to make that journey? What kind of leaders do we need to be in order to accomplish this calling or to accomplish the thing that God has called us to accomplish? And so when we talk about leadership values, I want you to understand it from this perspective. Number one, culture is about how we behave. So I define culture very simply, how 51% of a group of people behave. So if you've got a church of 100 and 51 of them go out and share the gospel with others, guess what you have? You have a culture of evangelism. If 51% of your congregants are welcoming, then you have a welcoming church. And so behavior, how people behave, will determine the kind of culture I have. But what they believe will determine how they behave. And so now what they think is important will determine how they're going to respond or how they're going to behave. And so my values impact what they believe, and what they believe impacts how they behave. Okay. And so whenever we're, again, getting clarity, we're number one, why do we exist? How will we succeed? Number two. Number three, how do we behave? And then number four, who must do what? Okay, this is all about our organizational chart. Now, I'm gonna give you a quick ninja tip. Your organizational chart needs to be reflective of your strategy. So let me give you an example. Working with one church, their strategy. In fact, let me do this. I'm gonna pull this up real quick. Second here. So I'm gonna pull up what we call this is what we call a playbook, and this is a playbook of one of the churches that I've been working with. And I want to point a couple of things out to you. Here we go. Let me stop sharing my screen. And okay, so this is the playbook of a church called Harvest Church Frazee, right? So they've got vision, strategy, and so they've got their vision. Um, they've got their values, right? How do we behave? Then they've got their strategy. This is how we're going to accomplish our vision. The vision for them is to transform Frazee and the surrounding community with the love and hope of Jesus Christ, right? So that's what they want to see. They want to see a transformation in the lives of the people in their community. Okay, how are they going to do it? They're going to identify purpose, help people identify purpose. They're going to help people learn how to love God. And then as a church, they're going to love the community. So this is their strategy. Those are their three steps. Now, if we keep working our way all the way down to their organizational chart, we start to see that they actually have here is the director of identity, and the director of how to love God, and the director of loving your community. Each one of these strategies has a person who is responsible for it. Why? Because if you don't do that, your strategy is just words on a paper. But when we now have people who are responsible for these areas, now we can actually lean on them, and it's someone is accountable for the success or the failures of this specific department. And then the next step, and I'll show you, just clear this. And so now the next step is, right? So we said one of the strategies is loving God. He has Mike responsible for it. And so what does loving God look like in their church context? Well, they're trying to teach the youth how to love God in the worship services and the execution of their services. So this is one of the areas where they're going to demonstrate how, they're teaching the people how to love God in these contexts. And so Mike is now responsible for these ministries, because when these ministries are active, they are fulfilling that strategy. And if they do all of their strategies, they will fulfill the vision, right? I want to make sure that that makes sense. Vision, the way we accomplish vision is by fulfilling the strategy. The way we fulfill the strategy is by making sure that someone is responsible for the strategy and then organizing our ministries under that specific strategic step or strategic anchor. I like to call that instead. And so we put all of this information together, and this is what we would call a playbook. So that way, all of the key leaders, the pastor, everyone who's on board will fully understand what it looks like to be a part of this. All right, let me go back to my slide deck. Okay, so we answer these questions. And so here's kind of my question to you, or, wouldn't you agree if every person knew exactly what the church was building and where they fit, growth would feel a lot less stressful, right? And if all of your key leaders, it was clear to them, this is where we're going. This is the role that I play in helping us get there. It would be a lot less stressful for you as leaders to have to now figure everything out, or as pastors to now be responsible for everything, because everyone would know the role that they play and how the role they play impacts the church and impacts the ministry. And so I mentioned, once we answer these questions, we put them together into a document and we call that the playbook. And so here's one of the biggest keys. Organizing for growth isn't about complexity, it's about clarity. Right? So if you're doing too much, you might be creating complexity in your ministry. You've got ministries that might be competing against each other. You've got leaders who are serving in multiple ministries. And I know we look at him and we say, man, that guy's so faithful. But is it the best use of his giftings and talents if it's split in different areas? What I prefer is to make sure that there's clarity, because whenever we have clarity, there's alignment. And whenever there's alignment, and I learned this a couple of years ago, my oldest son, he was about 3 or 4 then, he dropped one of his toys under a table. We were at a restaurant, and when he went to pick up the toy, he hit his head on the table. We took him to, we typically see a chiropractor. We took him to the chiropractor, and she started to kind of mess with his head, and she said, whenever he bumps his head, you've got to bring him to me immediately. Now, I am a skeptical New Yorker. And so when a doctor says to me, bring him to me immediately, I'm thinking, you want to utilize me to pay for your mortgage, right? So you want me to come over immediately. And I said, well, why? Why should I need to bring him? She said, well, whenever his cranials are misaligned, it impacts his nervous system. Whenever his nervous system is impacted, it affects his immune system. And whenever his immune system is compromised, he becomes susceptible to all kinds of sicknesses and diseases. And when she said that to me, it was like the Holy Spirit just prompted me. Whenever there's misalignment in the ministry, the church becomes susceptible to all kinds of sicknesses and spiritual diseases. This is where we get division. This is where we get people who have their own personal agendas. Why? Because there is misalignment. And so if we have misalignment, the issue isn't alignment, right? Alignment is a fruit. The issue is clarity. Clarity is the root, right? Just to be really clear, when I look at issues, I've got to ask myself, is this a fruit issue or is this a root issue? Fruit issues you can cut off, but it'll come right back unless you deal with the root. This is Pastor Rennell. We worked with him a couple of years ago. He said, my single most impactful win was being able to finally build an organizational structure that frees me up as a senior leader and provides the pathway for all of my leaders to grow into all they're called to do in our church. Okay, so here's the key commitment I want you to make. I want you to kind of write this down somewhere. When are you going to take the time to answer these 4 questions? I know you're busy, and I know you've got sermon prep, and you've probably got counseling, and you might even have a wedding to do, and you've got hospital visits, and you see how we've got all of these things will rob us of our time. What I want to challenge you is select a date and time right now, whether it's next week, whether it's tomorrow. where you're going to give 30 minutes at least to answer these 4 questions for your church. All right, so as you think of that, I'm going to just kind of take a quick pause here. Questions, takeaways, you can feel free to unmute yourself, ask any questions you might have about what we just covered. I feel like we covered a lot of heavy stuff in like 15, 20 minutes, so I want to make sure it's clear. Any questions, about what we just covered, how it applies to your church? No, it makes 100% sense. Pastor Mark?
Yeah, Ariel, does how formalized do you do the playbook? Do you print it out and have it like kind of published and distribute to everybody who's volunteered or just the leaders of the teams?
It's a great question. So one, yes, we make it formal in the sense that um, when we first initiate the playbook, it's more like ideas on a piece of paper because we're fleshing things out. But then over
Mm,
time, we want it to become like an official document. We typically have 2 versions. One that we'll share with the top tier leaders. So there might be some stuff that we kind of consider private, and I'm not going to share with every volunteer. And then we'll have a version that we can share with all of the volunteers.
I see.
Um, yeah, so anything in the playbook. So for example, there might be some, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. We'll talk about a scoreboard. When we talk about a scoreboard, there might be some items on the scoreboard that are financial, for example, financial goals we want to accomplish. I may not share those things with volunteers. So that version I may pull out. There might be a playbook version that's just for the elder board or the board of directors, however, whatever your overall top structure or your key pastors. And so then I'll separate those things. Um, you know, so yeah, I'll make sure that the right people are seeing the right things. My experience has been this. There might be some people that just aren't spiritually mature to handle all of the dynamics of the ministry. There might be a little disillusion. They think all we do as pastors is pray, and just kind of walk on water or something, and not realize that there's some hard decisions that we're making behind the scenes. There's some things, some hard conversations we're having with people. And so some of those things so again, I'm cognizant of having at least 2 levels, minimum 2 levels of a playbook. One is top level leaders, the other one is everyone else. Pastor Michael wrote that he likes the illustration when the church is misaligned, it becomes susceptible to diseases. Yeah, unfortunately for my son, that illustration came at his expense. So
Mm.
you know he had a little bit of a nut in his younger days. I used to joke around that we need to get him a helmet. He needs to walk around with a helmet, bump his head, or I would drop him every so often, not on purpose. I don't know why they think I was abusive, but he bumped his head a couple times. But yeah, that it really is something that I think one of the things that we need to, as pastors, manage is the clarity side. I think that one of the biggest challenges, at least from my experience, pastors have is with this idea of clarity. Um, we know we're supposed to do services, and I think we had this conversation yesterday, Pastor Mark, with the group call. Um, we think that the full purpose, or at least the impression I get from some of the pastors I've interacted with, that the full purpose of church is just to do Sunday services. And I like to challenge and say, what is Sunday services? How does my Sunday service infiltrate the day-to-day lives of people?
Right.
Right? What am I doing to help people grow Monday through Saturday?
Absolutely.
As I start thinking that way, then I start saying, okay, so my service, it becomes a little bit more of an igniter for what I believe God wants to do in people's lives. Thus it changes some of the things that how I preach, not necessarily what I'm going to preach, but how I preach it, or action steps, or how we implement certain things, because I want people to take it beyond just Sundays. I love Sundays, but I think if you're just focused on Sundays, it's like a boxer fighting with one hand behind his back.
Yeah.
You you got to have the one too. Pastor Mike, I serve as a youth pastor and I will respond to the four questions. Right? Yeah, and that's a great point. Pastor Michael just wrote, he serves as a youth pastor and he's going to respond to the four questions for the youth ministry and share them with his senior pastor. And so, yeah, so if you've got people under you, um, I like them to look at it. I want them to look at those four questions from two angles, though, where you're looking at it specifically from, God, what do you want me to do? I want the people under us looking at it from the lens of, hey, what is it that God has put on the heart of the pastor, and how can we support that? Right. So if I'm the director of X, Y, and Z, or the youth pastor, I'm not just looking at my area as an isolated thing. It is part of an overall church. And so my question has to be, how do I make sure that whatever I'm creating is in alignment with what God is putting on the heart of the senior leader? So that way we're always on the same page versus creating something that creates tension eventually, or is kind of like a silo operating all on its own. Any other questions before we move forward? Going once?
Is the playbook something that you update every year, or how does that look?
That's a great question. So for the most part, I'm trying to think through, not every year, maybe there's some adjustments to the organizational chart. Sometimes one leader steps away, I add another leader. For the most part, the vision is the vision and it stays the same. And then the second part is the strategy. I think how we do the strategies might change. So for example, let's say one of the strategies is to reach the community a certain way, but it changes, right? Maybe that community, hey, we're going to reach the community through schools. But then the boards decide, the Board of Education decides they're not going to partner with churches. And we're going to change our strategy and our approach. So there might be some things that change. Vision typically doesn't change. Leadership values typically doesn't change. Some pastors tweak the language. Maybe they don't like the way certain things is being said. But we don't go into a deep dive every single year, reevaluating every little detail. We'll see as we're working through it, you'll be able to walk away and say, oh, this makes sense, or now this, we need to make some adjustments, or this wasn't clear enough. You'll find, Pastor Billy, that as you're working over time, you'll refine it, but it's progressive. So like maybe 2 months from now, you're like, oh man, that vision is not clear enough. Or man, we just did X, Y, and Z, and it makes me feel like we need to make some adjustments. Um, I like to keep the playbook close. So as I'm going through stuff, I'm making adjustments, because a lot of times we feel and sense things, but then we don't actually implement those things. And so whatever inkling that we might be feeling, or prompting we might be feeling, it just kind of, yeah, I got to do that, and then we move on to the next thing. I want to make sure that it is reflective, but not necessarily a deep dive. I think as you're working through the year, you make adjustments.
Ariel, would it be appropriate then to make sure that when we're working on the playbooks, and especially in our strategy, to make a distinction between strategy and a tactic? Our tactics will change, but generally strategy doesn't change for a while. You know,
Yes,
it shouldn't change year by year. It should, you should try a strategy, and then as you evaluate it over time, then you go, okay, maybe we need to adjust the strategy. But tactics can change week by week or month by month, actually, right?
yes, and thank you for the clarity. So inside of the playbook, when we write some of the ways that we're going to implement, those things the language might change, or how we do it might change. But yes, the overall, like I tell some of the pastors I'm working with all the time, at the end of the day, you're gonna love people. How you love people might change.
Right.
You know, But if that's your strategy, so for example, one church, their strategy is encounter, equip, and extend. Encounter meaning they want people to encounter the presence of God. Well, that might look different from one service to the next, right? Your prayer meeting looks one way, your maybe a Sunday service might look another way, but then you do an outreach service. And so encounter might look a bit different from one service to the next, but we still want people to encounter the presence of God. Equip, right? Equip might be a Bible study, might be discipleship, might be small groups. But at the end of the day, I want to equip people. It just might look different from one, the tactic might look different. But the overall goal is going to be to equip. And so again, what we're saying in essence is if I do these things, it's going to help me draw closer to fulfilling the vision. Which, by the way, before I forget, I didn't remember to do this last time. In the chat, I am putting the link for the template to the ministry playbook. So that way you guys can kind of see some of the other questions and you can answer them accordingly. All right. We got time for one last question. Going once. Going twice. All right, let's keep going. So now that we have clarity, right? Now that we kind of have an idea of where we believe the church should be going and what we want to accomplish, we go to step number 2, which is what we call leadership teams. Okay. And I said this earlier, but I used to ask, if I ask pastors if they have a team, the typical answer I'll get is yes. But when I start to dig a little bit, we realize that having a team of volunteers is different than a team of leaders. What I mean by volunteers, just to be clear, I don't mean that you need to have paid staff. What I mean is you have people who are going to execute what you want them to do. Their job is they're going to come and they, Pastor, what do you want me to do? I'm going to do it. And then they do it. But what we need is people that are going to help us figure out what needs to be done. And I'll typically call those leaders. And so, yeah, we need volunteers. But if you only have volunteers, everyone is looking to you for direction, right? And typically volunteers, they wait for instructions. And if they don't, they'll make 2 mistakes. Number 1 is this. They don't do anything without direction, right? Because they're looking to you for instructions, for direction. They're saying, Pastor, what do you want me to do? Well, I haven't heard from the pastor, so I'm not going to do anything. And guess what that does? No ministry is getting done. Everything is being stalled. Or number 2, they take initiative, but they don't do it right. So now you've got people on the team who are doing things, but they're not doing it right. And now you're cleaning up the mess afterwards, right? And so this is what happens when you just have volunteers. No one takes ownership. They help, but they don't lead. And so if the pastor is gone, ministry stalls. Have you, and just maybe give me a thumbs up or a nod of the head, have you ever been in a position where you're gone for a week and the ministry stalls? It just feels like nothing, I'm not present, and so nothing really got done. Yeah, I see a couple of head nods, right? And so it's because we've got volunteers, but what we need is leaders who have clarity on what needs to get done. And so when this happens, when we don't have enough leaders, what typically happens is the family becomes the leadership team. Right. So now we're dragging our 15-year-old to help us run sound, lighting, video, which is, I love it. I want my son serving all the time, but I don't want him to be serving and kind of like the only thing that I'm leaning on. Like if he's not there, the whole sound ministry is going to fall apart. And so burnout happens because every decision still flows through one person, which is a senior leader, right? And here's the thing. Volunteers end up feeling undervalued because they never get an opportunity to step up. I remember being in that position where I would feel in my heart like, oh my gosh, I have a thought, I have a word, but there's no opportunity for me to teach. There's no opportunity for me to share. because I'm not a pastor. I want to do this, I want to help in that capacity, but there's no room. And it would just kind of make me feel like, I, honestly, it was like this tension inside because I felt stuff burning inside of me, but there was no real outlet. And it would get frustrating and to the point where at times I'd just be like, you know what, whatever. And so let me say this, you don't need more volunteers. You do, but more than volunteers, what you need is leaders, right? And so this is what we do in order to identify leaders, because this is I'm gonna really I'm gonna say something, it's a stretch, and I've said this a couple times to other pastors, and I found it to be predominantly true. You probably have a group of people who are leaders that have never been invited into leadership. They didn't know that they had the capacity to leaders. And so now now you're finding, okay, yeah, these are some qualifications, and this person has been exhibiting these things. Maybe we can give them more. One of the questions that was just asked is, are leaders discovered or developed? And I think it's both. The reason I say it's both is because there are people in your congregation who already have giftings. I remember specifically this one person, he was a VP for something Stanley. It was one of those financial companies. Blah 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 Stanley. I can't remember the name of it. The guy was a VP. He was crushing it at his job. But in the ministry, we had him doing some minimal stuff. And then as I started to talk with him and realize this guy's got all of these giftings and talents. Why are we not using him? And then we started to give him opportunity. And so we discovered him, but as we put him into position, we realized that some of the trainings that he had in the corporate world didn't transfer over to the ministry world, right? So how he addressed people in the corporate world because he was a boss was different than the way he needed to address people who were serving and not getting paid, right? And so there was some development. So I say it's discovered and developed. So how do we discover people? For me, I'm looking for 4 qualifications. This is again, this is my starter. We call it the 4 C's. Number 1 is commitment. I'm looking for people who are going to get here early, stay late, who their yes is yes and their no is no. I'm okay with someone saying I can't make it. I'm looking, and let me just say this. The number 1 thing I'm looking for isn't talent. I'm looking for commitment. Okay. I know people who are talented, talented. I knew one person who was super gifted, very creative, amazing, but was always late. And it would drive me nuts. We even it was to the point that I was overseeing the creative team at that point in time, and we actually created a video where the senior pastor was like, "Where?" And then he would say the person's name. And yeah, we put him on blast, and it was hilarious. And he shot the video, so he knew the direction we were heading with the video. But it was so common of a joke because there was a rehearsal. He was the drummer, and the rehearsal started. It's like, where is this guy? And he was late. A video shoot, he'd be late, right? So commitment to me is so important because if I have to now, and I remember saying this to a leader, I said, if I've got to tell you to speed up, you're probably not the right person. I want to be in a position to tell you to slow down. Hey man, you're going too quick. We can't keep up with you. Slow down, leader. But if I've got to constantly be turning around saying, hey, keep up, man, come on, then you're probably not the right person for the position. Right? So I'm looking for people who are committed. I'm also looking for character people. Right? I want people who love the Lord, who they're, what they say, how they operate, how they act in front of me, behind me. This is who they are. I want chemistry people. What I mean by chemistry is this. If you're leading and no one is following, you're just taking a long, lonely walk. Right? So what we want is people who can ignite teams, get people stirred up and excited. And then capacity. What I mean by capacity is, can you do more over time? Right? Because here's the thing, as the ministry grows, I also want to make sure that the leadership capacity grows. So as leaders grow, they need to be able to grow with the ministry, right? And so, when we're looking at leaders, I'm saying, hey, the church is growing. Can you grow with the, can you grow with the ministry? And so we kind of take this and we put it inside of a resource. We call it just a leadership evaluation. And you'll see right here, we list the 4 C's. And then when I'm looking for leaders, I'm ranking them from 1 to 5. Right. And so if someone is a 2 in chemistry, but I'm like, man, this guy's good, then now I know this is an area of training and development for this person because I've got to help them become better at working with people. But I'm looking at this and I use this as a way to A, evaluate potential leaders, B, determine what gaps or what developmental gaps we need. You'll see over here, these are the leadership values. If you remember, we talked about the values in our first step when we were gaining clarity. I also evaluate people based on the values. These 4 and my leadership values, guess what they become? They become my leadership development curriculum. Right? So when I'm looking to train leaders, I'm training them best. Well, my handwriting's horrible. But I'm training them based on these areas. I'm saying, hey, if get the job done is a value for us, then we're going to work through and I'm going to show you ways that you can get the job done because as a volunteer, I get it. You might have a full-time job, you might have kids. And so how do we become more efficient with our time? All right. I'm taking leadership values and I'm turning them into curriculum. And so give me 1 second because I want to also share this document with you. That way you can utilize this to evaluate your leaders. And it's going to load. So when I say competency, I think competency and I think capacity. I'm using those words kind of interchangeably. I'm sorry, the question was, would I consider adding competency to someone to the list? And so when I look at I used to use the word competency and I kept forgetting it because it was such a big word. So I just started to use capacity. But for me, I'm looking at someone's skill set, so their ability to learn or to grow. And what I want to make sure is that they have those capacities inside of them. Because as the ministry grows, I want them to grow with the ministry. And so this is the evaluation. Was there someone asking a question?
Well, I was just going to expand a little bit on that question I had on the competency thing. It was the reason why I asked that is in terms of identifying leaders. I mean, if we saw like your example was good. Yeah, it was really good about that guy working in the financial area. He's crushing it at work. Wouldn't somebody who's a leader at work make for a good leader in the church with the right guidance and discipleship type of thing?
Absolutely.
That would be then you go, okay, hey, there's a guy who's a potential leader in the church. So let's recruit leadership types kind of thing. It's kind of like, evangelizing, like it's like evangelizing leaders. That way, when you get them into the church, they're already leaders. They know what it means to be a leader, right?
Yeah, the only thing is I'll say this, my number one requirement is this right here, commitment.
Right.
Because I know a lot of people who are high capacity, but they don't have the time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes, just to go off on a short, quick tangent, I've had people who are like doctors in the ministry, but they can't commit time.
Mm-hmm.
So what we would do with them is we would literally make up hours that they can serve during the week because that was the only time that they would be available. So great people, but if they're not available, we can only use them so much based on their availability.
Availability, yeah.
Yeah. Pastor Michael, are the numbers on the scale defined like 1 equal better? So 5, yeah, 5 is high, 1 is low. So I'm looking for, so let's say for example, the four C's, the highest you can score is 20. So I'm looking for someone who's at least above 12 or 12 and above. Um, and at the end of the day, you got to work with what you got, right? So if everyone on your team is a 5 out of 20, then that's what you have. And so you may have to just kind of make sure you're developing them over time. That's why when the question was, are they developed or are they discovered? The answer is both, right? There are innate giftings that God has placed inside of people, but we've got to, Proverbs 20 verse 5 says, man is like a deep well, and it takes the wise to draw it out. And so there are things inside of people that I need to be able to draw out. Okay. So wouldn't you agree that having leaders run with ministry while keeping you connected is far better than volunteers waiting for instructions? Right? So much better to, again, I'd rather tell people slow down than to have to tell people speed up. If I'm spending my time telling people to speed up, we're in trouble. Okay, so we identify leaders based on the 4 C's, and then we equip them with the outcomes. This is what we call a position agreement, right? This is the title of the role, a summary, which is a description of the actual role, who it reports to. We take our leadership values and drop it in here. What are some of the expectations? And I split expectations into 2 ways. Number one is their leadership level. So, for example, if you are overseeing a department, there's certain expectations I have of you versus if you're overseeing a ministry versus you're leading a team versus you're a volunteer, right? Those are levels of leadership. If you're a pastor, there's certain expectations I might have of you versus if you're a deacon, right? So leadership levels will determine the expectations, and then also the role. So if you are the director of outreach or you're the director of discipleship, I'm going to have different expectations of you based on those roles. And so with the position agreement, we give that to people and help them understand what we're asking them to do. And then this is what we call a leadership interest meeting. That's actually me here conducting, and this is one that we did a couple of weeks ago. And there's 3 simple steps for this. Number one is invite volunteers, step 1. Number 2 is unpack direction. And then number 3 is invite to serve, right? So we're inviting the leaders. And these, I want you to see this. These are the leaders that are doing this, right? So this isn't the senior pastor. She's not the senior pastor. We identified the leaders, and then we actually assigned people who wanted to be part of that ministry. And we said, hey, go talk with the leader. Why? Because we're giving ownership over to people. I don't want the senior pastor to do all of this. So here's what I want you to just really think through. Using the 4 C's, you might actually have some people who might be potential leaders. Identify 3 of them and say, hey, by Sunday, by next week, I'm going to speak to them. I'm going to meet with them. Okay. Any questions? Questions, takeaways? Going once, going twice. Okay. Step number 3, which is accountability. Before we go into step number 3, just kind of, hey, has this been helpful so far? Yeah? Okay. Okay, I just want to make sure this has been hitting. Okay, sweet. When I get the thumbs up, I feel good. All right, so step number 3, accountability. And so ministries, right, they have meetings, and I know this has never happened to you. Okay. So I am absolving you. I'm saying this has happened to me. I've been in ministry meetings, talked about the issue, came back to the same meeting, talked about the same issue again. A month later, came back, and we talked about the same issue. And so we have meetings, but nothing moves forward, right? And so what happens is leaders, especially the senior pastor, promises things on Sunday, but by Wednesday, it's forgotten. No one is actually executing. And so when that happens, what happens is now the senior pastor has to check on everything or it falls apart. And so progress kind of feels like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Just kind of, again, let me know, a nod of the head. Ever find yourself having to follow up after somebody, right? And so what happens is we have meetings, and I still remember being in this one meeting, and for a moment I was like, this feels like deja vu, because I felt like we talked about this issue already. And we did. We had talked about it 2 weeks before, and we had come up with a solution, but there was no accountability. And so the solution never got implemented. And so now we're talking about the same issue because it happened again, just to a different person. And so leaders, they typically get frustrated. So not volunteers, I'm talking about leaders. They get burnt out from a lack of clarity or encouragement. And the pastor finds himself frustrated when he starts taking things back, right? I know you've never said this. I've said this. In my mind, I've said it's faster if I just do it myself. It's easier when I just do it myself. And so in order for us to get to that next level, what we need is accountability. How do we hold people accountable? Right? Accountable is not a no-no word. It's actually necessary for the ministry to move forward. And so here's a couple of different things we can do. Number one is install what I call a weekly rhythm, meeting, 15, 30 minutes. It's just a weekly check-in with some of your leaders. Okay? If you've got people on staff, then you do it during the daytime. If everybody's a volunteer, then you do it during the evening. A 30-minute meeting. This is what it looks like. You know, hey, Blair, what are the top 3 things you're working on today or this week? Billy, what are the top 3 things you're working on this week? Mark, what are the top 3 things you're working on this week? Right? And it just gives us a chance to check in with people. And then near the end, you just kind of say something to the effect, hey, do you have any questions, or is there anything you need from anyone on this call? And if they say, yeah, I do, I need something, then I said, great, then reach out to the person after this call. Right? So that way, the 30-minute call is just me checking in, and if they need to connect with one another. But when I start to do this week in and week out, guess what's going to happen? Week 1, when the person says, I didn't do it, there's going to be a level of embarrassment per se, or at least feeling that sense of, man, I screwed this one up. When you feel that pressure, you're not going to do it again, right? So the following week, someone's holding me accountable. And, and you have this meeting, whether you have 100% attendance or not. Okay? You pick a day, you pick a time. We used to do a meeting like this every Monday at 8 o'clock at night. We go for 30 minutes. We had about 7 people on, and top of the you're working on. What are you working on? What are you working on? What are you working on? And even though what that other person was working on didn't directly pertain to me, now as part of the team, I knew what everyone on my team was working on. And then if they needed help, I'd be able to say, as a senior pastor, I'd say, okay, hey, it looks like Mark, like you're not doing what you need. It looks like you're struggling a little bit in this area. Hey, James, can you help Mark out with this thing? Because I saw you did something similar, and man, it was fantastic. Right now, I'm kind of causing the teams to really interact. Right. So number 1, I'm doing a weekly meeting. Number 2, I have a scoreboard. Right. What is my scoreboard? My scoreboard is a way for me to keep track of the things that are important. Here's what happened a couple of years ago. I was working with a church, and I remember being in a leadership meeting, a team meeting, where we were checking things in. And it was November. I still remember it was November. And the senior pastor had a moment of frustration that he let out. because he said, I cannot believe that it is November and we still do not know what we're doing for Christmas. He was frustrated. And then afterwards, he said to me, why did this happen? How is it that we don't know what we're doing at this point in time? And I remember saying to him, I said, the reason is because we do not have a scoreboard. We're not keeping track of the things that are important. And so this is what a scoreboard looks like, right? On the left-hand side, we have our goals, right? These are, when you look at the playbook, that's what you're going to see. One of the questions is, what's most important right now? And so these are the things that are most important right now. By the way, this is one of those things that changes frequently, because when you get a goal done, guess what? You need to find another one. My recommendation is 5 to 7, depending on how big your team is. Every goal has to have someone who's responsible for it. Okay. Now, when we have our weekly meetings, guess what I'm doing? I am gauging every single goal. I'm saying, David, Pastor David, hey, how is fixing the leak in the bathroom going? Is it red? Is it yellow? Is it green? If it's green, fantastic. If it's yellow, hey, we have time, we'll talk about it. If it's red, I need to find out what do we need to go from red to yellow. Okay. These are major points of accountability. So the things that are most important are always in front of us. Then we do the same thing for the departments. Again, I'm not saying every little ministry, but if you remember the strategies, right? So we talked about vision, and then we said every vision is broken down into strategic steps. Well, when we move to an org chart, every strategic step turns into a department. So my encounter department, my equipping department, right? So now I'm going to ask Maria, who's responsible for my services. Hey, Maria, how's service planning going? Is it red? Is it yellow? Is it green? If it's red, guess what? We need to figure out why is it red and how do we fix it? Okay. This is a way of being able to hold people accountable on a consistent basis. So that way now we know what's most important and what's happening, in front of us. And so give me 30 seconds and I'm going to find the scoreboard sheet. Whoops, I can't do it this way. And that way I can drop that in there. With all the docs that I'm putting in the chat, just make sure that you make a copy. That way you can go in and edit it. If you try to edit it himself, this is my master copy. So you won't be able to edit. So you go file, make a copy, and you'll be able to edit it. So in the chat, you should see the scoreboard. And then there was one more position agreement template. Okay, and I'm also going to put the position agreement. This is the position. Okay. So you've got the position agreement that I mentioned earlier, and you should also have the scoreboard. And then the last thing when it comes to accountability is celebrate wins and course correct any misses. So if someone does a great job on something, man, we should give them a high five. Why? Because what you celebrate will get repeated. If somebody is off on something, then we may need to correct them, right? And correcting is important because what correcting allows you to do is make sure that people are clear on what's the expected outcome. Okay. All right. So I want you to just consider this. You don't need to hold everything together. Utilize a 15 or 30-minute rhythm meeting, a 30-minute, meeting with your leaders to just create more progress. And it's so much better to do that than spend hours of firefighting. One more ninja tip. one of the biggest things that I learned is I do not hold one-on-one meetings with anyone on my team unless we're doing some sort of counseling or dealing with personal issues like, I got issues at home with the family or I feel discouraged. Or like if it's a personal issue, then that's a one-on-one conversation. But if it's ministry related, we're gonna have those conversations in a team context because at least for me, one of my biggest weaknesses is when I make decisions, I don't always do a good job of communicating them to everyone else. So instead of now being responsible for making a decision and now having to go and communicate it to everyone else, I'm just going to have everyone else in the room. And so, hey, if you have an issue and we need to talk about it and it's ministry related, bring it up during our weekly meetings. That way, everyone can hear the decision that needs to be made. Okay. Versus me having a one-on-one meeting with someone. Again, unless there's a personal issue. Hey, I don't like my other team member. Okay, let's talk about that privately to figure out what's going on, and then we can bring them in to figure out how to resolve it. But if it's work related, it's going to be a team meeting. All right, let me just take a quick pause here. Any questions about the accountability side of things?
I missed it all because we had some random visitors. And so is
Yeah.
the recording going to be available or how?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. My hope is
With the
that
Academy.
Yep. I'll send you guys all a recording, a copy of this tomorrow. So you'll get and in the document I'll also put all of the in the email I'll put all of the docs that I made available also. So you guys can see it. Um yeah, absolutely. Any and yeah, and I think when you guys signed up, you got access to like a course site. So I'll put it there also, and I'll make sure that you get it via email. Okay, awesome. Any questions before we keep moving forward? Going once, going twice. All right, so let me just quickly recap. Um, so in the beginning, right, we talked about um we stay stuck when the weight of ministry falls on one person. And we said staying stuck isn't just about the ministry, but it impacts the people in the community because now they don't get to hear the gospel. They don't get to grow spiritually. We also talked about three key things: God, leader, systems, right? This is kind of key. And today was primarily we focused on the leadership side. We mentioned that faithfulness isn't doing all of the ministry yourself. Faithfulness is equipping others to do it with you. I kind of walk you through these three things: organize for growth, building teams, accountability, right? We said when it comes to organize for growth, one of the key things is needing clarity and alignment. We went through these four questions: why do we exist? How we would succeed? How do we behave? Who must do what? We said that clarity leads to alignment and that growth it shouldn't be complex. It should be clear, but not complex. Leadership teams, we said, was one of the key things. And then volunteers typically make two mistakes. Either they don't do anything because they're waiting for you, or they take initiative, but they don't do it right because they don't have any direction. And then we said we need to identify leaders based on the four C's. We talked about position agreements so that when you identify leaders, you can actually give them the clarity that they need. And then we talked about how to host a leadership interest meeting, unpacking the direction of the ministry, and inviting them to actually serve, to take on a role in the ministry. We also talked about accountability. And we said that typically what happens is when there's no accountability, leaders don't get stuff done, pastors get frustrated, and then they kind of decide it's easier for me to just do it myself. We said there's three key things to holding accountable. Number one is these rhythms, like a weekly meeting, scoreboard that we kind of went over, and then celebrating wins and doing course correction. So let me just stop right here and just kind of say, hey, I'm going to take a moment and I'm just going to share, and it's completely up to you, but I want to share with you some of the things that we're doing to help other pastors with some of these things. Because at this point, you typically you have three choices. Number one is you can leave today and do nothing with what we talked about, which please don't let that be a choice. Because the reality is, what I find with pastors is when you don't do anything, you find yourself right back in the same place. Now, I remember talking with one pastor, and he said to me he had been pastoring for 10 years. And he said, hey, if you told me when I first started, I would be serving 10 years and still at the same place than when we started, I wouldn't have believed you. But now I feel like I lost the last 10 years. Choice number two is this, man, I felt like we've given you a ton of stuff that you can take and you can begin to implement. I've given you some resources. You're going to have the replay. And so you can take some of this stuff and you can do it on your own. Or choice number three is you can let us help you do some of this stuff faster. So you can get to the finish line even quicker. And so I just want to make sure kind of that you guys are okay if I share with you the details of our program. Everybody's okay with that? And if you're not, you can be like, nah, dude, I'm done. And then later on, I'll give you the the resource that we'll give at the very end. So let me go through this quickly. I want to introduce you guys to what we call Church Growth Academy Plus, and it's based on the Ephesians 4:12 framework that we've been talking about, right? And this is a step-by-step system that helps small church pastors stop doing everything alone and build a healthy, growing church without burnout. And as I have mentioned in our previous in the slides and stuff, this came from a place where I've experienced burnout. I actually stepped away from ministry. I actually left a ministry role because of experiencing burnout and how challenging and difficult some of it was. And so when I finally saw this Ephesians 4:12 verse, it really dawned on me that the biggest mistake I was making was taking on more than God wanted me to take on. And that in order for the ministry to grow, I needed to learn how to do two things really well. Number one is develop people, lead people. But number two is the systems that were needed. And so Church Growth Academy, it's a 6-month implementation program where I'm going to personally help you build the church growth systems we've talked about in some detail, right? You're going to get weekly implementation calls, every Wednesday, monthly one-on-one calls, the complete vault of trainings, templates, daily support in school, so you never feel stuck again. These are some of the modules you'll see inside. Number one, we talked about organizing for growth. And really, this is the idea of, what does it look like when we start to run together? And imagine how fast you get to the finish line when all of your leaders are clear on what the finish line is supposed to look like, right? So you get a clear written plan that organizes your ministry for growth, define exactly where your church is headed, map out your structure, build a culture of momentum instead of frustration. And here's the thing, it would be amazing. I don't know if you've ever felt this, but I felt it's amazing to finally stop guessing what's next and lead with confidence, knowing that your team is running in the same direction with you. Module number two, what we call attending to belonging. This is one of our systems to help people get connected. We're going to create a 4-step assimilation process. We're going to help you follow up so guests don't feel forgotten. We're going to help you build a reputation as being a welcoming church. And this is where what I want you to do is never wonder why guests don't come back, right? I want you to be in a position where you're like, man, we're going to do these things and we know people are going to come back to the church. Module number three, what we call an evangelistic culture. This is what we call your outreach engine, equipping your church to reach your community, right? We're going to leverage personal invitation. This is one of my favorite things, is getting your congregation to invite their friends and family to the ministry. Using low-cost strategies that bring in new families every month, like Facebook ads or using social media, and then transforming your congregation into your greatest growth strategy. So your congregation is helping you reach people. And here's the thing, the most impactful churches, it's not that they're the biggest, they're the ones who know how to mobilize their people to share the gospel, right? And that's what we want to help you do in this step. Step 4, stop doing ministry alone. And we spent some time talking about this. This is our leadership pipeline, right? This is where we begin identifying potential leaders. We train them and we multiply the impact while reducing the burnout. And it would be amazing to be able to say, man, finally, I'm free of having to feel the entire weight of the ministry on my own. I know it's being done. Even if you're not in the room, because the leaders and because you've given them direction, things are being done. And then number 5, this is disciple and develop. And again, this is where we help build leaders. And this is how we stop the revolving door of volunteers, right? They come and they leave and they serve for a little bit, but then they're gone. No, what we want is we want a process that people are being matured, they're growing in their faith, and they're being developed and discipled. Okay. And so in this course, in this program, it's available on the school platform. You get video trainings, resource documents, transcripts. You get access to the members area, and it's you and your team. So once you jump in, you kind of give me some of your team names, and they get access to this too. So that way they're working on it with you. And it's you get access, and so you'll have availability to it, and your team does too. There's weekly accountability calls. And then there's weekly master classes, right? And the accountability calls are for this purpose. I want to check in on your progress. So during the accountability calls, these are what we call hot seats. And it's like, all right, Pastor Billy, last week you said you were going to work on X, Y, and Z. Where are we with that today? Okay, we have master classes. This is more of like training. Yesterday, we had a master class, and it kind of went off the rails a little bit, but we talked a little bit about how the church should be responding to the assassination of Charlie Kirk, right? Interesting conversation. We landed on the need to leverage our Sundays to create disciples. Because in order for there to be a transformation in our society, we need to see a transformation in the congregates, the people who call our churches home. And so that became a major thing. So you get access to social media and ads reviews, which is just another call where if you're running ads, we'll look at your stuff, and we want to make sure that we can give you the feedback that you need. Okay, so we mentioned the accountability calls, check-ins, and here's the thing: the cost is it's $149. Now, when I do this, and $149 a month, and it's 9 payments or 10 payments in total is $149. So when I do this with churches, there's some churches that bring in people part-time to do this kind of stuff. And when you think of a year long, they might be paying about $20,000 somebody to work part-time for them. A lot of the programs that I've looked at that do something similar, they might be closer to about $4,000 for the year. If you jump on, if you're not, because you're on this training, typically this program is $197, but because you're on this training, it's $149 to start today. And then there's 9 payments of it. Or if you want to, you can pay in full, $997, and you get access to the entire year, right? So you get, all of the entire year access to the program, $997, pay in full. So if you are interested in this point in time, if you want to join us, in the chat, you can put payment or you can put pay in full, and then that way I'll know, what link to share with you. You can just type that right into the chat if you're interested, you want to be a part of this program. There's some bonuses. Okay, so let me just walk you through some of these bonuses very quickly. Bonus number 1 is a program we call Stewardship Made Simple. And it's literally all about how do we see an increase in giving? Because here's what I want to be able to say to you. I want to be able to say to you, hey, the program, we're going to teach you how to help turn your givers into generous givers. And so literally on Monday, we're having a session with some of the other students who are on Stewardship Made Simple, where we're going to plan their year-end offering. So we're going to look at October, November, December, and what do we need to do to make sure that by December, they're ending the year in the black and not in the red, right? So that's part of the Stewardship Made Simple component. We have our workshop vaults, where again, workshops like these, you'll have access to all of them. We have a 30-day momentum accelerator. Some of you, may have wanted to jump in or have already. What this is going to be is we're going to work through some of these things in detail. So the first 30 days of our program, we're working on the playbook, right? So we're literally going to help you work the playbook. That's the first 30 days. Bonus number 4. Now this is only available to a small set of people because it is some work, but we'll literally do your assimilation setup. So whether you're using Planning Center, we'll go into Planning Center, we'll set you up with the follow-up emails, text messages, the actual forms that you need to be able to set up so you can follow up with people, help you structure who should be responsible for what. All of the stuff that people like, I don't have the time or I don't have the technical know-how to do, We'll literally do that for the first 3 people who join us. In addition, our bonus, we have what we call our AI Wizards library. So when you start to recruit people and now you've got to create position agreements, that's work. Right now, all of a sudden, man, I got to create a job description for this person. Oh man, what do I do? Well, you go into this AI wizard, and Pastor Ryan recently did 15 of them in about 25 minutes. Why? Because it asks you questions and it helps you create your stuff. I mean, and then this is for your follow-up. It helps you create your entire follow-up process based on our templates and our process. So what I love about these wizards is you get to do more ministry in less time. Okay. And so here's my guarantee. Listen, if you show up and you do the work, I guarantee you we're going to help you double your ministry. Okay. If you don't, we'll work with you free one-on-one until you do. Okay. So my guarantee, Pastor David, he was at 30. Within a couple of months, he was at 70. Liberty Church, they were at 200. Within about 7 months, they were hitting 400 on a Sunday, right? And so when you do the right things, you're going to see the right results, right? And so as I mentioned, it's $149 to start today, and then it's 9 payments of $149, or if you want to pay in full, it's $997. Okay. So if you want me to share the details of sign up registration just in the chat, you can put payment link, and I'll payment or pay in full, and then I'll share that link with you. Okay. So I'm going to stop here. I did promise you a resource if you hung out to the end, and then I'll just stop and see if there's any questions. So let me just, oops. I'm just going to pop this in there, share this with you guys. So this is our leadership interest meeting template. It's literally a step-by-step process to walk you through doing a leadership interest meeting. This is the meeting that we use to recruit people and get people into our ministries. So I've put that in the doc. So just as a quick recap, you should have at this point the playbook template. You should have the leadership evaluation. You should have the position agreements. You should have the scoreboard. And now you have the leadership interest meeting template. Okay, so all of these are resources that you can use to just kind of speed up the process. Okay, so I'm going to just stop here. Questions, comments, any thoughts that you might have, any questions I need to answer, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask away. Now, was this helpful? Did you guys walk away with some stuff and kind of feel like, okay, we can definitely do some things? Was it too much information? Was it overwhelming? No? Okay. Was it worth your time? I mean, you've been here for about an hour and 40 minutes. Pastor Michael wrote, very helpful. Yeah, okay. Awesome. Fantastic. Okay, fantastic. So if there's no other questions, I'm gonna just kind of give another minute or so for any questions. Going once, going twice. Good stuff. Thank you, Pastor Mark. All right. So thank you guys so much for joining me. You'll see some more details. I'll send an email with some more details on the program, and then also I'll send you guys the replays for tomorrow. Okay. And I think if any of you jumped on the accelerator, we're going to start that the first Monday of October. Right. So next week I still got to do the stewardship class and then the accelerator one. For those of you who jumped in and tried and signed up to it, we'll be going for 4 weeks for the month of October. And by the time we're done, you'll have your playbook settled. So that'll be a good deal. All right, guys, have a fantastic, fantastic afternoon. Thank you guys for joining me. And thank you for being part of this replay. I feel a little bit more better. I feel like my it was clearer. What I should have done though is I should have wore the same shirt that I did the last time. So if I said anything better on Tuesday, I could have cut it in. You know, now yeah, I didn't think that one through well. All right, awesome guys. Thank you guys. Have a fantastic, fantastic afternoon.
Take care.
Take care, guys. God bless.